Two-time AP SE Columnist of the Year, the first digital reporter to win 3 straight NSMA National Sports Writer of the Year awards. In other words, he is extremely pedigreed, good friend of mine, longtime friend of the program. Adrian Wojnarowski is my guest. Woj, it is so good to have you back. How you doing?
Jim, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me as always.
Woj, it's always good to have you. In fact, it's been a moment or two since you and I last spoke, so just bring me up to date really quickly. How are you doing? How is your life right now? Because things are always hectic in said life.
I'm doing great. I appreciate you asking. Yeah, listen, we're just this is how free agency works. You sort of free agency, most of the players sign, and then there's these lingering trade situations that usually, and sometimes often take you through the rest of the summer. And I think that's where we are right now with Kevin Durant, with Donovan Mitchell, and with the uncertainty around the Lakers roster. If there's a move or two still to be made, perhaps around Russell Westbrook or elsewhere on their roster, to see if they can improve before they get to training camp.
There you go. So let's get into some of that, starting with Kevin Durant. Woj, it's been nearly 3 weeks since you reported that Brooklyn Nets GM Sean Marks was working with Kevin Durant to find a trade for him. At that time, did you think that that would be something that could potentially be wrapped up pretty quickly, or did you always expect that nearly 3 weeks later he was going to be exactly where he was then, a member of the Nets?
Yeah, trades for players of Durant's stature, and perhaps there's never been a player of his stature on the trade market with 4 years left on his deal, still at the apex of his talent. Maybe there's never been one quite like this. They typically don't move quickly, and this one hasn't. Obviously, there are any number of teams interested in Durant, but I think because he's got so much time left on his deal, it takes some of the urgency away, maybe a lot of the urgency away from Brooklyn to have to do something quickly. You think back, 2018 with Kawhi Leonard, who, certainly was an all NBA level player, certainly one of the best several players in the league. When he got traded, he was headed into the last year of his deal. He had not played the previous season, and it had been this situation hanging over the Spurs. And Toronto did a good job at that point of kind of waiting out the market a little bit. They had the best offer. And people were uneasy about giving up too much because they felt, and looking back rightly so, that Kawhi Leonard was headed to L.A. one way or another that following off season. This is different, Jim, because, again, Durant just signed the extension.
Adrian Wojnarowski is joining us. Woj, listen, I understand that KD is not the easiest guy to read. I also understand that you do not want to speak for him. But if you had to guess, why do you think that he wants to be traded?
I don't want to guess on it, Jim. I think there's a number of reasons. I think he's going to have to speak to this at some point. I think for people to have a clear view of it, I think it's cloudy for a lot of people whose jobs it is to understand this in terms of teams and organizations and what it is he wants. I think there's a number of factors, including obviously just how it's gone in Brooklyn and how last season went, and the underachieving nature of this window in time he's been there. I think the Warriors winning a championship and then sort of this whole new wave of criticism that came Kevin Durant's way in the aftermath of Golden State having won since he left. Obviously, they had won with that group before he arrived. I think that played a part, and I think the uncertainty around Kyrie Irving's extension talks and the fact that he didn't get an extension with the Nets, and obviously he didn't find a sign and trade that he could get somewhere else, so he's back in the last year of his deal. Jim, I think they're all factors, but I think ultimately KD's got to speak on it himself. But so I think for Brooklyn, they want him back. They don't want to trade him. They've never wanted to trade him. And I think if at some point Kevin Durant said to them, hey, I view this differently. I'm in a different place. Let's run it back this year with Kyrie Irving under contract, with Ben Simmons in the lineup, getting healthy, and all the other pieces you have there. Obviously, Brooklyn would welcome that. That hasn't happened yet, as far as I know. And so I think Brooklyn continues to try to find trades for Kevin Durant, although the asking price is steep. It has to be steep for Kevin Durant, and no one has really come close to being able to meet it yet, and so it's all at a standstill.
Adrian Wojnarowski joining me in the jungle. Woj, you mentioned also the Lakers. In fact, you reported on Friday night that Russell Westbrook and his agent parted ways. This was a long-time relationship, a really good relationship. Is this just a matter of a long-time relationship coming to an end, running its course, and things like that happen? Or, in your opinion, is there more to it than that? Is there disagreement about how they each see his future?
Well, certainly I think there's factors in everything you just listed there, Jim, but it's not that uncommon in the NBA. Most players have more than one agent in their career. Russell Westbrook, Thad Fouché had been together, 14 years since he came out of UCLA, did max contracts, did a max extension, renegotiation extension. There hadn't quite been one of those done back in Oklahoma City. And then the last couple of years getting some trades moving around the league as situations changed. They worked together on that. These things do run their course. I don't think there's much more to it than that, Jim. I think for Russell Westbrook, I think the uncertainty of what it is in LA right now, I think for Westbrook, I think he, like anybody else, he wants to be wanted, and he wants to be wanted by them. He wants a chance to have a better season there this year than they had last year. And obviously, I think a lot got put on Russell Westbrook. Maybe too much got put on him for the Lakers missing the play-in. And you look at how much time Anthony Davis missed, how much time LeBron James missed. And then you look at the composition of the roster and the construction of it. They weren't built to be very good defensively, and they weren't. They didn't have enough shooting. And there was a lot put on Russell Westbrook, who was the one healthy enough anyway to play virtually every night. So I do know that he has really liked getting to know Darvin Ham. He's connected with him. He's liked what he's heard from him. And I think Darvin Ham has worked hard to build a relationship with Russell Westbrook. And if he's going to be on the team, to be able to go into training camp in a better place maybe than the whole thing finished last year.
Well, so what about that? Like, you've also reported that the Nets, they may or may not get that deal done for Kevin Durant. They are focused on that. But before that, could they do something with Kyrie Irving? I mean, do you see a scenario where Kyrie could end up with the Lakers? Is that at all possible?
I mean, Jim, it is possible. I wouldn't rule anything out at this point. I think it's right now unlikely. And I think if you're the Lakers, there are other possible scenarios with Russell deals that I think they can, I don't know if they can do, but they would like to try to be able to do. And there's other deals without Russell Westbrook where he would stay. His salary at $47 million is hard to trade. Typically, a contract like Russell Westbrook's gets traded for another contract that's comparable. John Wall, Chris Paul. When you're trading players with just that much salary, to make the money work, typically you've got to, you don't want to always take back 3 or 4 players. It doesn't make sense because you're going to gut a team might be gutting its depth to do that. But there are teams with cap space like Indiana that could take on Westbrook's money hypothetically and do a deal and do a different kind of deal. But the Lakers have been trying to work on that since the end of the season. Nothing there yet. Indiana has a player in Buddy Hield, a center, a guard in Buddy Hield, who's a former Rob Pelinka client, who he knows well. Miles Turner, their center, certainly is appealing to the Lakers, but it's unclear that the Lakers would be able to. You're going to have to incentivize a deal, meaning you're going to have to put draft picks in most all these deals when you're moving Russ out right now, and there's a hesitancy on the Lakers' part to do that while you don't want to you don't want to feel like you're giving a season away. The money does come off the cap this year, but if you give away your 27 first-round pick, your 29 first-round pick, it just limits what you can do. It's not necessarily that the Lakers are ever going to pick with those players, but you want to use those picks to really improve your team, not just get money off. And so I think that's spot they're in between right now. But I do think the Lakers will probably do something between now and training camp or now and the start of the season, whether it may not be an all-star level player. And, some of the guys they've talked about, Eric Gordon in Houston. I mentioned Buddy Hield. Again, both former Rob Pelinka clients, as he knows well. And those are both rebuilding teams in Indiana, Houston, that want to get draft picks back for a player. The Lakers don't want to give as much, obviously, as they would want. That's what these negotiations, that's how they take shape.
It's such good content, such good information. Woj, not to get greedy with your time, but just to finish it off, you mentioned it at the very top. What about Donovan Mitchell? How likely is it that Donovan Mitchell is with the Jazz at the start of training camp?
They're definitely talking to teams, Jim. I think Donovan Mitchell, again, 4 years left on his deal. Danny Ainge's history in making deals is he does them when he feels like he's getting max value. There's certainly no rush to have to do a deal. New York is very interested in him, but I think New York is trying to be in a situation where they don't bid against themselves, where they don't keep offering, where they're not put in a position where they have to keep offering more and more, and they're not clear that there's somebody else offering more and more. And so because of just that dynamic, I think this is probably not a quick deal anywhere. The Knicks certainly are motivated on Donovan Mitchell. They picked up Jalen Brunson, obviously, in free agency. And the Knicks have a bunch of picks. They have some young players that might be of interest to Utah. I think that one is going to play out over the summer. And certainly I think there are going to be other teams that are interested in Donovan Mitchell. But the Jazz are in a position of strength just because, again, like Brooklyn, 4 years left on Donovan Mitchell's contract.